Hello, dear viewers. Welcome to podcast channel. Please like and subscribe if you enjoy our content. Now, let's dive into today's story. Here's how it unfolded. My wife, Jenna, and I were enjoying a vacation, a long-awaited escape after a grueling year. We chose a charming coastal town, hoping its tranquil beaches and inviting hotel would spark some romance. I had no idea that this getaway would unravel my trust and disrupt my life. On our third day, Jenna proposed that we spend the afternoon separately. She wanted to shop for souvenirs while I visited the local museum. It seemed harmless, and I was glad to have some time for my own interests. A few hours later, I returned to the hotel. When I entered the lobby, my heart skipped a beat. Jenna was at the bar, engaged in conversation with two well-dressed, attractive men. They were clearly taken with her, and she responded with laughter and flirtation that felt foreign to me. Feeling uneasy, I decided to observe from afar. The men bought her drinks, and she responded with giggles and flattery. It was as if I was watching a stranger, not my wife of 10 years. Then one of the men leaned in to whisper something in her ear, and she smiled seductively in response. They all stood up and, to my shock, began heading towards the elevator. I followed them quietly, my mind racing with confusion and anger. They reached our floor and walked to the room next to ours. I peered around the corner and saw them enter the room. My heart sank as I realized what was likely to happen. I waited a few minutes, summoning the courage to confront them. The door creaked open slightly. I peeked through the gap and saw Jenna undressing in front of the men. They watched her intently, and she seemed to enjoy their attention, completely at ease. My stomach churned with a mix of betrayal and revulsion. I waited until they had her undressed and tied to the bed before I stormed in. What I saw was like a scene from a nightmare. Jenna, my wife, was bound and naked, and the men were poised to take advantage of her. I shouted, causing them to freeze in shock. But what happened next was even more shocking. Jenna, rather than pleading for help, looked at me with a smirk. "Oh, honey, didn't expect you to show up," she said with a sarcastic tone. "Looks like the secret's out." I was stunned. "What the hell is happening, Jenna?" I demanded. She laughed, a cruel, mocking sound. "Isn't it obvious?" I needed some excitement. These gentlemen were kind enough to offer it. The men, sensing the tension, started to back off, but Jenna wasn't done. "You always were so predictable, always so boring. I needed more, and you just couldn't give it to me." My world crumbled in that moment. Everything I thought I knew about my wife and our marriage was a lie. I wanted to lash out and make them all pay, but I was paralyzed by the betrayal. As I stood there grappling with my emotions, Jenna looked at the men and shrugged. "Well, boys, looks like the fun's over. You can go now." They quickly gathered their clothes and left, leaving Jenna and me in a tense silence. I untied her, my hands shaking with a mix of rage and heartbreak. "We're done," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I can't believe you did this." She looked at me, her eyes cold and unfeeling. "Oh, we're far from done. This is just the beginning." Back in our hotel room, the shock hadn't worn off. Jenna sat on the bed, casually flicking through her phone as if nothing monumental had happened. My mind was racing with questions, but I couldn't bring myself to ask any of them. I just stood there, staring at her, trying to reconcile this stranger with the woman I had loved for so many years. "Jenna," I finally said, my voice breaking the heavy silence, "what the hell was that?" She didn't even look up. "That dear husband was me having some fun, something you clearly don't know how to do." Her words cut deep, each one a dagger to my heart. "Fun? You call cheating on me with two strangers fun?" Jenna rolled her eyes, a gesture so dismissive it made my blood boil. "Don't be so dramatic. It's just sex. You need to loosen up." I could feel the anger bubbling up inside me. "Loosen up? You humiliated me. You destroyed our marriage." She finally looked up, her eyes cold and calculating. "Our marriage was over long before this trip, and you know it. You just didn't want to see it. Her nonchalance was infuriating. So this is my fault now? Partly, she said with a shrug. You never listened to me. You were always too busy with your work, your hobbies, your friends. I needed attention, excitement, and you couldn't give it to me. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. So your solution was to cheat on me? To humiliate me? Jenna sighed, as if she were tired of explaining herself. Yes, I wanted something more, and you weren't giving it to me. So I took it. I sank into a chair, the weight of her words pressing down on me. How long? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. How long has this been going on? She hesitated, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of something in her eyes, guilt, regret, but it was gone as quickly as it appeared. A few months, maybe longer. A few months. The thought made my stomach churn. And I never noticed? I trusted you. Jenna laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. That's your problem, isn't it? You trust too easily. You never questioned me, never suspected a thing. It was almost too easy. Her cruelty was staggering. I don't even know who you are anymore, I said, shaking my head. Maybe you never did, she replied, her voice icy. Maybe you were too wrapped up in your own little world to see who I really am. I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed my coat and headed for the door. I'm going out. I need to clear my head. Whatever, she said, not even looking up from her phone. Take your time. As I walked through the hotel's corridors, my mind was a whirlwind of emotions, anger, betrayal, sadness. How could this have happened? How could I have been so blind? I found myself at the hotel bar, ordering a stiff drink. As I sipped it, I replayed the events of the past hour in my mind. Jenna's coldness, her indifference, it was like she had become a completely different person. Or maybe, as she said, this was who she had always been, and I had just never noticed. I downed my drink and ordered another. The bartender gave me a sympathetic look. Rough night, he asked. You have no idea, I muttered, taking a long sip as the alcohol started to take effect. I felt a numbness creeping in, it was a welcome relief from the emotional turmoil, but I knew it was only temporary. The reality of Jenna's betrayal would be waiting for me when I sobered up. I stayed at the bar for a couple of hours, drinking and trying to make sense of everything. Finally, I decided to head back to the room. I couldn't avoid Jenna forever, and we needed to talk to figure out where we went from here. When I returned, Jenna was already asleep, or at least pretending to be. I climbed into bed beside her, keeping as much distance between us as possible. As I lay there in the dark, my mind kept racing. The woman next to me was a stranger, and I had no idea what to do next. Sleep was a long time coming that night, and when it did, it was filled with nightmares, nightmares of Jenna with those men, of her laughing at me, of my world falling apart. The next morning, I woke up with a pounding headache and a sick feeling in my stomach. The events of the previous day came rushing back, and I felt a wave of nausea. I turned to look at Jenna, who was already awake and scrolling through her phone, completely unfazed by everything that had happened. Morning, she said casually, as if we hadn't just had the most devastating conversation of our lives. Morning, I replied, my voice hoarse. We need to talk. She sighed, putting down her phone. Sure, let's talk. But can we make it quick? I have plans today. Plans? I asked, incredulous. After everything that happened, you have plans? Yes, she said, standing up and stretching. Life goes on, doesn't it? I couldn't believe her nonchalance. Jenna, this is serious. We need to figure out what we're going to do. She walked over to the mirror, checking her reflection. What's there to figure out? We are over. You know it, I know it. Let's not drag this out. Her coldness was like a slap in the face. So that's it? 10 years of marriage, and you're just done? She turned to look at me, her expression unreadable. What do you want me to say? I'm sorry. Fine, I'm sorry, But I needed something more, and you weren't giving it to me. Her words stung, but I couldn't help but feel a spark of anger. And you think cheating on me was the answer? She shrugged. Maybe it wasn't the best solution, but it was the only one I could think of at the time. I shook my head, feeling defeated. I don't even know what to say to you. Then don't say anything, she replied, grabbing her purse. I'm going out. We'll talk later. Before I could respond, she was out the door, leaving me alone in the room. I sat there for a long time, trying to process everything, the betrayal, the coldness, the way she seemed to have moved on so easily. It was all too much. Eventually, I got up and decided to go for a walk. I needed to clear my head and figure out what my next steps would be. As I walked through the town, I couldn't help but feel a sense of loss. The woman I thought I knew, the woman I loved, was gone, replaced by someone I didn't recognize. I found myself at a small cafe and decided to sit down and get a coffee. As I sipped it, I thought about our marriage. Had I really been that blind? Had I missed all the signs that Jenna was unhappy? I replayed our years together in my mind, looking for clues, but I came up empty. Lost in thought, I didn't notice the woman sitting next to me until she spoke. You look like you could use a friend. I turned to see a friendly face, a woman around my age with kind eyes. Yeah, you could say that. Rough day, she asked, taking a sip of her own coffee. Rough couple of days, I admitted. She smiled sympathetically. Want to talk about it? Normally, I wouldn't pour my heart out to a stranger, but something about her made me feel like I could trust her. So I told her everything about Jenna, the vacation, the betrayal. She listened quietly, nodding occasionally. When I finished, she sighed. I'm so sorry you're going through this. No one deserves to be treated like that. Thanks, I said, feeling a bit better having gotten it all off my chest. I just don't know what to do next. Take it one step at a time, she advised. Focus on what you need to do to take care of yourself. And Dante, don't let her walk all over you. Her words resonated with me. Maybe it was time. I started thinking about myself for a change. I thanked her for listening and left the cafe with a newfound sense of determination. When I returned to the hotel, Jenna was back. She was sitting on the bed, scrolling through her phone again. Have a nice walk? She asked without looking up. Yeah, I did, I replied, trying to keep my tone neutral. We need to figure out how we're going to handle this. She looked up, raising an eyebrow. Handle what? This, I said, gesturing between us. Our marriage, or what is left of it. She sighed, setting her phone aside. Look, I don't want to drag this out. Let's just call it what it is, we are done. I nodded, feeling a mix of sadness and relief. Okay, but we need to figure out the logistics. How are we going to handle the separation, the divorce? Jenna shrugged. We'll get lawyers sorted out. It doesn't have to be complicated. Fine, I said, feeling a sense of finality. Let's get through the rest of this vacation, and then we'll start making arrangements when we get back. She nodded, picking up her phone again. Sounds good. The rest of the vacation passed in a tense, uneasy silence. Jenna and I barely spoke, each of us wrapped up in our own thoughts. I couldn't stop thinking about the conversation I had with the woman at the cafe. Her kindness and empathy had been a balm to my wounded heart, but I didn't even get her name. On our last night at the hotel, Jenna seemed unusually quiet, even for her. She sat on the bed, staring at her phone, a frown creasing her forehead. What's wrong? I asked, more out of habit than genuine concern. Nothing, she replied curtly. Just thinking. I shrugged, not in the mood to push her. I decided to take a shower and try to relax. As the hot water poured over me, I tried to clear my mind, but the image of Jenna with those men kept flashing before my eyes. The betrayal was still too fresh, too raw. When I stepped out of the bathroom, Jenna was pacing the room, her phone clutched tightly in her hand. She looked up at me, her eyes blazing with anger. Who is she? She demanded. I was taken aback. What are you talking about? The woman you were talking to at the cafe, she snapped. Who is she? I felt a surge of annoyance. She's just someone I met. We talked for a bit, that's all. Jenna's eyes narrowed. Don't lie to me. I saw you. You looked pretty cozy for just talking. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You're accusing me of something after what you did. Seriously, Jenna? She crossed her arms, her expression defiant. You think you can play the victim here? You've been chatting up some woman behind my back. I laughed bitterly. You cheated on me with 2 strangers, and you're mad because I had a conversation with someone? Do you hear yourself? Jenna's face reddened with anger. You don't get to turn this around on me. You are just as guilty. I shook my head, incredulous. I can't believe this. You have no right to accuse me of anything. I have every right, she hissed. This marriage may be over, but that doesn't mean you can do whatever you want. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. Jenna, nothing happened. We talked, and that's it. If you can't handle that, that's your problem. She glared at me, her hands clenched into fists. I knew you were weak, but I didn't think you'd stoop this low. My temper flared. Me weak? You were the one who couldn't handle our problems and decided to cheat. You were the weak one, Jenna. For a moment, we just stood there, glaring at each other. The tension was thick, the air crackling with unspoken words. Finally, Jenna broke the silence. You know what? This is pointless. Let's just get through tonight and go home. We'll deal with everything else later. Fine, I said, my voice cold. But don't think for a second that I'm going to let you dictate how this goes. She rolled her eyes and turned away, clearly done with the conversation. I climbed into bed, my mind racing. The accusation was absurd, but it made me realize just how toxic our relationship had become. There was no trust, no understanding, only bitterness and anger. The next morning, we packed our things in silence and checked out of the hotel. The drive home was equally quiet, the miles stretching out in an uncomfortable, heavy silence. I couldn't wait to get back to start the process of untangling our lives. As soon as we got home, Jenna disappeared into the bedroom, slamming the door behind her. I collapsed on the couch, exhausted from the emotional roller coaster of the past few days. I knew this was just the beginning of a long, painful process, but I was determined to see it through. Later that evening, I received a text from an unknown number. Curious, I opened it and saw a message from the woman at the cafe. She had found my number through mutual contacts at the hotel. Just checking in to see how you were doing, the message read. I hope things are getting better. I felt a small spark of warmth. Despite everything, there were still kind people in the world. I typed a quick response, thanking her for her concern and letting her know I was hanging in there. As I hit send, I heard the bedroom door open. Jenna walked out, her face a mask of fury. Who are you texting? She demanded. I looked at her, tired of the constant accusations. It's none of your business. She snatched the phone from my hand and read the message. Her eyes widened with rage. You're still talking to her? Give me my phone back, I said, my voice low and dangerous. You're unbelievable, she spat, throwing the phone at me. You think you can just replace me like that? Replace you? I said, catching the phone. Jenna, you replaced yourself the moment you decided to cheat. I am done trying to make this work. Her face twisted with anger. Fine, do whatever you want, but don't expect me to make this easy for you. The days following our return from vacation were a blur of anger, arguments, and legal consultations. Jenna and I were barely speaking, except to hurl accusations at each other or discuss the logistics of our impending separation. It was a toxic environment, and I was counting down the days until I could move out and start fresh. One evening, needing an escape from the suffocating tension at home, I decided to go for a walk. I found myself wandering aimlessly through the neighborhood, trying to clear my head. As I turned a corner, I spotted a familiar face, the woman from the cafe. She was sitting on a bench, reading a book. Seeing her brought a sense of calm I hadn't felt in days. I approached her, and she looked up, smiling warmly. "Hey," I said, feeling a bit awkward. "Fancy seeing you here." She closed her book and looked up at me. "Hey yourself. How are you holding up?" I sighed and sat down next to her. "It's been rough. Things at home are tense." She nodded sympathetically. "I can imagine. I'm sorry you're going through this." "Thanks," I said, appreciating her kindness. "What about you? What brings you here?" She smiled a bit shyly. "I live nearby. This is one of my favorite spots to read." "Small world," I said, feeling a bit of the tension in my shoulders ease. We sat in companionable silence for a few moments, the sounds of the neighborhood around us. "Do you want to talk about it?" she asked, breaking the silence. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to unload everything, but another part felt guilty for even being here, talking to her. But something about her made it easy to open up. "It's just been a lot. Jenna and I are fighting constantly. She even accused me of having something with you, which is ridiculous." Her eyebrows shot up in surprise. "Wow, that's intense." "Yeah," I said, shaking my head. It's like she's looking for any excuse to shift the blame. She placed a comforting hand on my arm. "I'm really sorry. You don't deserve that." I looked at her, feeling a strange mix of gratitude and something else I couldn't quite identify. "Thank you. It means a lot." We talked for a while longer about lighter topics, our favorite books, movies, and places we wanted to visit. For a moment, it felt like a normal conversation, a brief escape from the chaos of my life. As the sun began to set, I realized I should head back. "I should get going," I said reluctantly, "but thank you for this. I really needed it." She smiled warmly. "Anytime. Take care of yourself, okay?" "I will," I promised. "And you too." I walked back home feeling lighter than I had in days, but as soon as I stepped through the door, the tension returned. Jenna was waiting for me in the living room, her arms crossed and a furious look on her face. "Where have you been?" she demanded. "Out for a walk," I replied evenly. "With her?" she spat, her voice dripping with accusation. I sighed, too tired to argue. "No, Jenna, I went for a walk by myself." "You are lying," she hissed. "I can see it all over your face." I felt my patience snapping. "You know what, Jenna? Believe whatever you want. I am done trying to explain myself to you." She stepped closer, her eyes blazing. "Don't you walk away from me." I met her gaze, refusing to back down. "What do you want from me, Jenna? Do you want me to admit to something that isn't true just to make you feel better?" She looked taken aback, as if she hadn't expected me to stand up to her. "I want you to be honest." "I am being honest," I said, my voice rising. "But you don't want honesty. You want a scapegoat. You want to shift the blame for what you did onto me." Her face twisted with anger. "You are pathetic." "Maybe," I said, feeling a sense of finality, "but at least I tried to make this work." "You threw it away." She looked like she was about to say something, but then she just shook her head and stormed off to the bedroom, slamming the door behind her. I sank onto the couch, exhausted. The encounter with the woman from the cafe had given me a glimpse of what it felt like to be seen and understood, but here in this house with Jenna, all I felt was misery. I knew then that I needed to get out. I needed to find a place of my own, a space where I could start to heal and rebuild my life. It wouldn't be easy, but it was the only way forward. The next morning, I called a realtor and started looking for apartments. I also contacted a lawyer to speed up the divorce process. It was time to take control of my life and leave the past behind. A few days later, as I was packing up some of my things, I received another text from the woman at the cafe. "Hey, just thinking about you. Hope you're doing okay." I smiled, feeling a warmth spread through me. Maybe, just maybe, there was a light at the end of this dark tunnel. But I knew better than to get my hopes up too high. There were still battles to be fought, still wounds to be healed, and Jenna wasn't going to make it easy. As I looked around the house that had once been our home, I felt a mixture of sadness and resolve. I felt a sense of loss but also a glimmer of hope. This was the end of one chapter, but it was also the beginning of another. The days that followed were a whirlwind of packing, legal consultations, and searching for a new place to live. Jenna and I continued to exist in the same space, but we were like ghosts to each other, barely acknowledging the other's presence. The only conversations we had were brief and transactional, about practical matters related to our separation. One afternoon, as I was packing up my things, my phone buzzed with a text. It was from the woman from the cafe, Emily, as I finally learned her name. "Hey, hope you are doing okay. How's everything going?" I smiled, grateful for her concern. "Hey, it's a bit chaotic, but I am managing. Found a place to move into next week." "That's great to hear. If you need any help, don't hesitate to ask." "Thanks, Emily. I appreciate it more than you know." As I set my phone down, Jenna walked into the room, her eyes narrowing when she saw me. "Who are you texting now?" I sighed, not wanting another confrontation. "A friend offering support, something I could use right now." She scoffed. "A friend, right? Jenna, I don't have the energy for this. We're getting a divorce, you don't get to dictate who I talk to." She folded her arms, her expression still icy. "Fine, do whatever you want." I shook my head and went back to packing. The sooner I was out of here, the better. The day of the move arrived quickly. I had rented a small apartment not too far from our current house. It was modest, but it was mine, a fresh start. As I loaded the last of my boxes into the moving truck, Emily texted again. "Moving day. Good luck with everything. Remember, new beginnings." "Thanks, Emily. Your support means a lot." When I arrived at my new place, I was greeted by a quiet, empty space. It was a stark contrast to the house I'd shared with Jenna, but it felt like a blank canvas waiting for me to make it my own. I spent the rest of the day unpacking, trying to make the place feel like home. It was exhausting both physically and emotionally. By the time I was done, I collapsed onto the couch, feeling a strange mix of relief and sadness. That evening, Emily texted again, "How's the new place?" "It's good. Still getting settled in, but it feels right." "Glad to hear it. If you ever need someone to talk to, I am here." I hesitated for a moment, then replied, "Actually, would you like to grab a coffee sometime? I could use the company." "I'd love that. How about tomorrow?" "Perfect. See you then." The next day, I met Emily at a small cafe near my new apartment. Seeing her again was like a breath of fresh air. She had a way of making me feel at ease, something I desperately needed. We talked for hours about everything and nothing. She told me about her job, her hobbies, and her dreams. I shared more about my situation with Jenna, about the move, and about how lost I felt sometimes. "You're stronger than you think," she said, her eyes kind and understanding. "You've been through a lot, but you're taking steps forward. That's what matters." "Thank you," I said, feeling a warmth spread through me. I really needed to hear that. As we said our goodbyes, I felt lighter than I had in weeks. Emily had become a beacon of hope in the midst of my turmoil, and I was grateful for her friendship. But as I walked back to my new apartment, I couldn't shake the feeling that things with Jenna were far from over. She was unpredictable, and I knew she wasn't going to let go easily. Sure enough, that evening, Jenna called. I hesitated before answering, not sure what to expect. "What do you want, Jenna?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "We need to talk," she said, her tone surprisingly calm. "About what?" "About us. About everything." I sighed. "Jenna, there is no us anymore. You made sure of that. Just meet me, please. One last time." I considered it for a moment. Fine. Tomorrow. Neutral ground? Okay. There's a park near your new place. Noon. See you then. I hung up, feeling a knot of anxiety in my stomach. Whatever she wanted to talk about, I had a feeling it wasn't going to be pleasant. But I needed closure, and maybe this would help provide it. The next day, I arrived at the park early, my mind racing with what Jenna might say. When she showed up, she looked different, more composed, almost vulnerable. "Thanks for meeting me," she said, sitting down on a bench. "Let's get this over with," I replied, not wanting to drag it out. She took a deep breath. "I've been doing a lot of thinking about us, about what happened. I know I hurt you, and I am sorry." I blinked, not expecting an apology. "Okay. I was selfish and stupid. I took you for granted, and I didn't appreciate what we had." I remained silent, letting her speak. "I don't expect you to forgive me, but I needed to say it. I needed to own up to what I did." Her words were sincere, but they didn't erase the pain. "Jenna, I appreciate the apology, but it doesn't change what happened. We are over. We both need to move on." She nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "I know. I just needed you to know that I'm sorry." "Thank you," I said, feeling a sense of finality. "I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for." She wiped her eyes and stood up. "Take care of yourself." "You too." As she walked away, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. It wasn't the closure I expected, but it was enough. It was time to look forward, to focus on rebuilding my life. As I walked back to my new apartment, I couldn't help but think of Emily. Maybe, just maybe, there was a chance for something new, something better. With the confrontation with Jenna behind me, I focused on settling into my new life. My days were filled with work and making my new apartment feel like home. It was a slow process, but each small improvement made the space feel more like mine. Emily and I continued to see each other. Our meetings were a bright spot in the midst of the chaos. She was a grounding presence, always ready with a kind word or a listening ear. Over time, our conversations deepened, and I found myself opening up to her in ways I hadn't with anyone else. One evening, after a particularly long day at work, I texted Emily on a whim, "Feel like grabbing dinner tonight?" Her reply came almost instantly, "I'd love to. Where should we meet?" We decided on a cozy Italian restaurant near my apartment. When I arrived, Emily was already there, looking as radiant as ever. She greeted me with a warm smile that instantly lifted my spirits. "How's the new place?" she asked as we sat down. "It's coming along," I said, smiling. "Slowly but surely. I'm glad to hear that you deserve a space that feels like home." "Thanks," I said, feeling a warmth spread through me. "It's been a tough transition, but I am getting there." We ordered our food and chatted about our days. As the evening progressed, I realized just how much I enjoyed Emily's company. She was easy to talk to, genuinely interested in what I had to say, and her laughter was infectious. After dinner, we decided to take a walk. The night was cool and clear, the perfect backdrop for a leisurely stroll. We wandered through the neighborhood, talking about everything and nothing. At one point, Emily stopped and turned to me. "I'm really glad we met," she said softly. "Me too," I replied, feeling a connection between us that was hard to ignore. We continued walking until we reached my apartment. I hesitated for a moment before asking, "Do you want to come up for a bit?" She smiled. "I'd like that." We went up to my apartment, and I gave her a quick tour. She complimented my decorating choices, making me feel a bit more proud of my efforts. "Can I get you something to drink?" I asked. "A glass of wine would be nice," she said. We settled on the couch with our drinks, the conversation flowing easily as the night wore on. The atmosphere grew more intimate, with a charged energy between us filled with unspoken words. Finally, Emily broke the silence. "I know this might be forward, but I feel like there is something between us, something worth exploring." I looked at her, feeling a mixture of excitement and fear. I feel it too, but I am still figuring things out. I don't want to rush into anything. She nodded, her expression understanding. I get that. We can take things slow, no pressure. I smiled, feeling a sense of relief. Thank you, that means a lot. She leaned in, her face inches from mine. But I don't want to wait forever, she whispered, her breath warm against my skin. I closed the distance between us, our lips meeting in a soft, tentative kiss. It was sweet and slow, a promise of things to come. When we finally pulled apart, I looked into her eyes and saw the same mix of emotions I was feeling. Stay, I said softly, not wanting the night to end. She smiled and nodded. I'd like that. We spent the rest of the evening talking and laughing, the weight of the past few months lifting with each passing moment. By the time we fell asleep, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in a long time. The next morning, I woke up to find Emily still asleep beside me. I watched her for a moment, feeling a sense of contentment. It was a new beginning, a fresh start, and for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful about the future. But life, as I had learned, was full of surprises, and just when I thought things were starting to settle, another unexpected twist was waiting around the corner. Later that week, as I was unpacking the last of my boxes, I received a call from Jenna. My heart sank as I answered, bracing myself for whatever drama she was about to bring. What is it, Jenna? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. There is something I need to tell you, she said, her voice unusually serious. What now? I asked, feeling a sense of dread. It's about the divorce, she said. I've been seeing someone, and I am pregnant. I was stunned into silence. Of all the things I expected her to say, this wasn't one of them. I know it's a lot to take in, she continued, but I thought you should know. Are you sure it's his? I asked, my voice sounding distant even to my own ears. Yes, she replied, her tone firm. I am sure. I took a deep breath, trying to process the information. What do you want from me, Jen? Nah. I just thought you deserved to know, she said, and I wanted to make sure we can finalize the divorce as soon as possible. I need to move on with my life. I felt a surge of anger and betrayal, but I pushed it down. Fine, let's get this over with. She sighed. Thank you. I'm sorry for everything. I ended the call and sat there for a long time, the weight of her revelation settling over me. It was yet another blow, but in a strange way, it also felt like a final release. There was no going back, no lingering doubts. Jenna had moved on, and it was time for me to do the same. That evening, I told Emily about the call. She listened quietly, holding my hand as I spoke. When I finished, she squeezed my hand gently. I'm so sorry you're going through this, she said softly. But I am here for you, whatever you need. Thank you, I said, feeling a rush of gratitude. I don't know what I'd do without you. She smiled, her eyes full of warmth. You are stronger than you think, and you are not alone. I felt a sense of hope. Life had thrown me one curveball after another, but I was still standing. With Emily by my side, I knew I could face whatever came next. Just when I thought life was finally settling into a new normal, fate decided to throw another curveball my way. Emily and I were growing closer, and for the first time in a long time, I felt genuinely happy. But life, as it often does, had other plans. It was a Thursday evening, and Emily and I had planned to have dinner at her place. I was looking forward to a quiet, cozy night. As I was getting ready to leave, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. Normally, I would have ignored it, but something compelled me to answer. Hello? I said, trying to mask my irritation. Is this Mark? A woman's voice asked. Yes, who is this? This is CLA, Jenna's sister. My heart sank. CLA and I had never been close, and the fact that she was calling me out of the blue couldn't be good. Hi, CLA. What is going on? It's Jenna, she said, her voice trembling. She's in the hospital. I felt a jolt of panic. Despite everything, the news of Jenna being in the hospital hit hard. What happened? She had a fall, CLA explained. She's not doing well. I think you should come. Without another word, I grabbed my keys and rushed to the hospital. My mind was a whirlwind of emotions, concern, confusion, and a lingering sense of obligation. Despite our differences, Jenna had been a significant part of my life. When I arrived at the hospital, CLA was waiting for me in the lobby, her face pale and drawn. "Mark, thank you for coming," she said, leading me to Jenna's room. I walked in and saw Jenna lying in the hospital bed, looking frail and vulnerable. The sight of her hooked up to various machines made my heart ache. I approached the bed, unsure of what to say or do. "Jenna," I said softly. Her eyes fluttered open, and she looked at me with a mixture of relief and pain. "Mark," she whispered, her voice weak. "I'm here," I said, taking her hand. "What happened?" She tried to smile, but it came out as a grimace. "I was stupid. I tripped and fell down the stairs." I squeezed her hand gently. "Why didn't you call me sooner?" She looked away, tears welling up in her eyes. "I didn't think you cared." "Of course I care," I said, feeling a pang of guilt. Despite everything, a part of me still cared about her well-being. We sat in silence for a few moments, the weight of our shared history hanging heavily in the air. Finally, Jenna turned to me, her expression serious. "Mark, there is something I need to tell you," she said, her voice trembling. "What is it?" I asked, bracing myself for whatever she was about to reveal. She took a deep breath. "The baby, it's yours." I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. "What? How?" "It happened before everything fell apart," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I didn't know how to tell you. I thought it would just make things worse." I stumbled back, my mind reeling. "Jenna, why didn't you tell me?" "I was scared," she admitted. "I didn't want to complicate things even more." I felt a rush of emotions, anger, betrayal, confusion, but underneath it all, a deep sense of responsibility. "We need to figure this out," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I know," she whispered. "I am so sorry, Mark." As I stood there grappling with the enormity of her revelation, CLA stepped into the room. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but the doctor needs to speak with you," she said. I nodded, feeling a sense of dread. I followed CLA to the hallway where the doctor was waiting. "Mr. Anderson, I am Dr. Patel," she said, extending her hand. "I am sorry to tell you this, but Jenna's condition is more serious than we initially thought. She has significant internal bleeding, and we need to operate immediately." I felt like I was in a nightmare. "Will she be okay?" Dr. Patel's expression was grave. "We're doing everything we can, but it is a high-risk surgery. You need to be prepared for all possible outcomes." I nodded, my mind numb. "Do whatever you have to do." As the doctor rushed off, I leaned against the wall, trying to process everything. Jenna was pregnant with my child, she was about to undergo a life-threatening surgery, and my relationship with Emily, which had been my anchor, was now shrouded in uncertainty. CLA placed a hand on my shoulder. "Mark, she's strong. She'll get through this." I nodded, but I couldn't shake the feeling of dread. I was about to become a father, and the mother of my child was fighting for her life. Hours later, as I sat in the waiting room, my phone buzzed with a message from Emily. "Hey, is everything okay? Haven't heard from you." I hesitated before replying. "I'm at the hospital. Jenna had an accident. It's serious." Her response was immediate. "Do you need me to come?" I sighed, feeling a surge of gratitude. "If you can, I could use the support." Emily arrived within the hour, her presence a comforting balm to my frayed nerves. She sat beside me, holding my hand as we waited for news. Finally, Dr. Patel emerged from the operating room, looking exhausted but relieved. "The surgery was successful," she said. "Jenna is stable, but the next 24 hours are critical." I felt a wave of relief wash over me. Thank you, Doctor. As Dr. Patel walked away, I turned to Emily, feeling overwhelmed. Thank you for being here. She squeezed my hand. Of course. You don't have to go through this alone. As I looked into Emily's eyes, I realized that life had thrown me another unexpected turn, but with her by my side, I felt ready to face whatever came next. The next few days were a whirlwind of hospital visits, anxious waiting, and emotional upheaval. Jenna's condition remained stable, and she slowly began to recover. The news that she was carrying my child weighed heavily on my mind, adding another layer of complexity to an already tumultuous situation. Emily was a constant presence, providing support and comfort. Her strength was a lifeline, helping me navigate the emotional roller coaster I was on. But despite her unwavering support, I could sense the strain this was putting on our budding relationship. One evening, after spending the day at the hospital, I returned to my apartment to find Emily waiting for me. She had cooked dinner, and the smell of homemade lasagna filled the air. I felt a surge of gratitude and guilt. Hey, she said, smiling warmly. I thought you could use a good meal. Thanks, Emily, I said, giving her a tired smile. You have no idea how much I appreciate this. We sat down to eat, and for a while, it felt almost normal. But the weight of everything hung over us, unspoken but palpable. After dinner, we sat on the couch, and Emily took my hand. Mark, we need to talk. I nodded, bracing myself. I know this situation with Jenna, it's a lot to process, she began, her voice gentle but firm. I care about you and I want to be here for you, but we need to be honest about what this means for us. I looked into her eyes, feeling a mix of fear and sadness. I know this is a lot to ask, but I don't want to lose you. You want to lose me, she said, squeezing my hand. But we need to set some boundaries. This baby changes things, and we have to figure out how to navigate this new reality. I nodded, appreciating her honesty. You're right. We need to be realistic. Emily sighed, looking down at our intertwined hands. I want to support you, but I also need to take care of myself. We need to communicate openly and make sure we're both okay with whatever decisions we make. Agreed, I said, feeling a sense of relief. Thank you for understanding. As the days turned into weeks, Jenna's recovery progressed steadily. She was released from the hospital, and I found myself juggling my responsibilities to her and my growing relationship with Emily. It was a delicate balancing act, but we managed. Jenna and I had several difficult conversations about the future, about our child, and about how we would co-parent. It was awkward and painful but necessary. Despite our differences, we both wanted the best for our baby. One evening, as I was leaving Jenna's place after another tense discussion, she stopped me at the door. Mark, I need to ask you something. I turned to face her, bracing myself. What is it? She looked down, her expression conflicted. Do you still love me? The question hit me like a punch to the gut. I took a deep breath, trying to find the right words. Jenna, I will always care about you. You were the mother of my child, but after everything that's happened, I can't go back to the way things were. She nodded, tears welling in her eyes. I understand. I just needed to hear it. I reached out and gently squeezed her shoulder. We'll get through this, Jenna. For the baby. She nodded again, wiping away her tears. Thank you, Mark. As I walked back to my apartment, I felt a strange mix of emotions, sadness for what had been lost, but also a sense of closure. Jenna and I had a long road ahead, but at least we were on the same page. Back at my apartment, Emily was waiting for me, her presence a comforting balm. She hugged me tightly, and I felt a wave of gratitude wash over me. How did it go? She asked, her voice muffled against my shoulder. It was tough, I admitted, but we made some progress. We're figuring things out. She pulled back and looked into my eyes. I am proud of you, Mark. This isn't easy, but you're handling it well. Thanks, I said, feeling a surge of affection for her. I couldn't do it without you. As the months passed, we settled into a new routine. Jenna and I worked out a co-parenting plan, and I attended every doctor's appointment, eager to be involved in the pregnancy. Emily remained by my side, her support unwavering. One day, as we were sitting in the waiting room for another prenatal appointment, Jenna turned to me with a serious expression. "Mark, I've been thinking. I want you to have full custody." I stared at her, shocked. "What? Why?" "I've made a lot of mistakes," she said, her voice trembling. "I want our child to have the best possible start, and I think that's with you." I was taken aback. "Jenna, are you absolutely certain? This is a monumental choice." She nodded, tears shimmering in her eyes. "I am certain. I want to be involved in our child's life, but I believe it's best for you to have primary custody." A mix of relief, gratitude, and a profound sense of responsibility washed over me. "Thank you, Jenna. This means so much." As weeks passed and the due date neared, I found myself preparing for fatherhood in unexpected ways. Emily and I grew closer, our bond strengthening daily. Finally, the day came. Jenna went into labor, and I hurried to the hospital, my heart racing with anticipation and fear. Emily was there with me, her presence providing much-needed calm. The labor was lengthy and challenging, but Jenna remained strong. After what felt like an eternity, our baby arrived, a beautiful, healthy girl. Holding her for the first time, a surge of love and protectiveness enveloped me. This tiny, delicate life was now my responsibility, and I was resolved to give her the best life possible. Jenna gazed at me, her face a blend of exhaustion and relief. "She's perfect," she murmured. "Yes, she is," I replied, tears welling in my eyes. As we adjusted to our new roles as co-parents, I realized that life had taken another surprising turn, but this one was for the better. With Emily by my side and our beautiful daughter in my arms, I felt prepared to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The journey had been arduous, but it had led me to this moment, a moment filled with hope, love, and fresh beginnings. I was ready to embrace it all, one step at a time. Thanks for tuning in, friends. Don't forget to subscribe and like.